word neuroplasticity. It's the most relevant word for every single listener.
Neuroplasticity has become almost a buzzword. People are putting it out there like whoever you are, you can be anybody. That is where the narrative does not touch.
Can anyone become a high performer?
You are the way you are now because of certain things that you went through as a child. So a lot of boys would look up to their dads and follow similar styles of emotional processing, which is why conflict happens. If it stretches for a long time, it can lead to mental health issues.
Oof. People are not able to gauge the appropriate time limit for going through breaking up.
There is no appropriate time to get over a breakup. It completely depends on sugar, alcohol, hookups, binge watching something can bring your dopamine levels up. You feel like you have fixed the problem, but you could even be worse off.
There's a lot of younger listeners who are just starting out their careers thinking about how do I move forward in my career.
What you are motivated for, that thing increases in value. Dopamine, serotonin, these two molecules come together to decide how much value each thing has in your life. So if you are motivated to watch cricket, watching that cricket match will be more valuable than reading a book because your body can only do one or two things at a time.
I think the bottom line understanding for professionals here should be choose a job that you enjoy. Every single person listening to this podcast has gone through mental health issues.
We are fighting too much and resting too little. I always thought that I am a very calm person. I brought that same energy to my relationship. I realized much later that I am not a calm person. I was in denial about certain emotions. So suppose if you and your partner are having a fight, go for a walk. If you start walking fast, it is like you're pumping dopamine into your brain. After 3 rounds, maybe the right outcome is still breaking up with that person, but you will approach that decision in a much more rational way.
Probably recorded more than 30 episodes with doctors, but I've found that the most practical episodes are the ones that touch upon neuroscience. In this episode, we have taken a deep dive into the basics of neuroscience and built it up to the advanced aspects of what neuroplasticity means, what the basic concept behind self-improvement is. So if you're someone who's trying to improve the quality of your life in any manner, if you're trying to grow in any manner, this episode will help you tremendously by first helping you understand the truth about your own mental health. They say that psychology is all about the software of the brain, but neuroscience is all about the hardware of the brain. It's important to understand both. And fortunately for us, we have one of the country's top neurologists and neuroscientists, Dr. Sid Warrier, taking us through this neuroscience special of TRS. Enjoy the episode. Welcome back to the Ranveer Show.
Thank you.
To the audiences as well.
What a time to come back.
So every year we end up doing probably just a couple of conversations on the details of neuroscience and how it applies to everyday human life. I don't think we've done an episode on the evolution of the human brain in a very long time. Done so many spiritual episodes, done so many medical episodes where we've spoken about health in general. I hope that today's episode is probably the deepest neuroscience episode that we've done until this point. And knowing the doctor sitting in front of me, I think it will be. Welcome to TRS.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Sid, I cannot start with a hi, how are you? Because I want to dive straight into the subject. Someone who's a high achiever, how is their brain actually different from the other people within the industry who are not able to achieve as much? What's happening different here? And the supplemental question is, can anyone become a high performer or is there a prerequisite?
Anyone can become a high performer. It depends on how much time do they have and what level of motivation do they have. Because essentially, all high performance is the ability to solve a problem better than other people. Or if you remove the competitive aspect from it, the ability to solve a problem. All right. Now, you give me any problem. Right? So if I'm a doctor, obviously medical problems are easier for me to solve. Now, you give me a physics problem. I'm not good at maths. I'm not good at physics. Is my brain capable of learning to solve that problem? The answer is yes. There is nothing in my brain that stops me from becoming a physicist. My brain can learn to recognize patterns of numbers. It can learn to recognize how to derive an equation, and it can learn to recognize what are the steps to be taken to solve a physics problem. But this will require time, because those neurons, when we talk of neuroplasticity, it's not an instantaneous thing. It's not that if I think about it, it'll happen. Those neurons take time to disentangle and form new connections. And the one chemical that is important for neuroplasticity is dopamine. Dopamine directs neuroplasticity. You need dopamine for neuroplasticity to happen, because dopamine is sort of like the glue that pushes neuroplasticity together. When I say dopamine, usually people associate dopamine as the happiness molecule. That if you have dopamine, oh, you feel good. But that's not true. Dopamine is actually the motivation molecule. Dopamine is what gives you that internal drive to get up and do something. And you can understand this from an evolutionary perspective, because dopamine was involved in the core drives that kept animals alive. Food, sex, these were the things that kept animals and species alive, and that is what is associated with dopamine. So that is what gives you motivation. If you are not motivated, then neuroplasticity will not happen. And if you don't give it time, neuroplasticity will not happen. So why can I not be a physicist? A, I'm not motivated. And B, I won't give time.
Your brain doesn't secrete dopamine with respect to physics.
Becoming that, correct, solving that problem.
But for you as a neurologist, your brain secretes more dopamine with respect to biology.
Absolutely. So you give me a patient case. You tell me that, oh, a 60-year-old patient came with these problems. My brain is already like, oh, what is it? What is it? So I'm getting that sense of anticipation. And if I can't solve that problem, I'm motivated to go read, get better. So motivation plus time is what directs neuroplasticity.
Yeah. I think the bottom line understanding for professionals here should be choose a job that you enjoy.
Beautifully said, because if you don't enjoy it, that basically means that you don't have motivation. So no matter how much time you give it, one of the corollaries of motivation is attention.
What does that mean?
So one of the things that happens when you have motivation is that attention comes along with it. So let me try to put it in a easier way. When you are motivated, a lot of things happen in the brain. When you're motivated, what you are motivated for, that thing increases in value in your brain. So if you are motivated to watch cricket, watching that cricket match will be more valuable than reading a book or going for a walk or anything else that you can do with your body. Because your body can only do one or two things at a time. So your brain has to pick what to do with your hands, with your legs, what do you do with your time. So whatever has the highest level of value will get all your attention.
And this is subjective for every human being.
Everybody, absolutely. And this is what everybody is fighting for. Netflix is also fighting for your attention. All the cinema theaters are fighting for attention. Friends are fighting for attention. Everybody wants to be the highest value in your life. And that is decided by how much dopamine and in a way also serotonin, these two molecules come together to decide how much value each thing has in your life. That is why you say that if you are already passionate about a particular job, that means that motivation will come more easily, and so neuroplasticity happens more easily. All functioning human beings, I'm not talking of anybody with any disorder. I'm not talking of, say, Parkinson patients or anybody with depression. But otherwise, the level of chemicals are pretty much the same. How they act or where are they directed towards is different. So it's not that somebody who is sitting at home and scrolling on his phone has lower levels of dopamine than somebody who's hard at work at their job. It's just that what their brain is motivated to do is different, right? So when you want to, say for example, if you don't want to lie on the couch, you want to get out and be motivated about something else, the trick is to find out where your dopamine is directed, where your motivation is directed.
Gotcha. Okay, So, for the sake of becoming better at our careers, let's create some call to actions here.
Okay.
The one out and out call to action I gained from everything you just said is choose a job that you enjoy. What else? Which is hyper practical.
You can also do a bit of reverse engineering here. You give me a job that I might not initially enjoy. How can I begin to enjoy it? The only thing that you enjoy overall is yourself. This is just one of those ego tricks that the brain plays. So you will find enjoyment in anything that you identify with. You have to start seeing yourself as somebody who does that job. Let me try to simplify. Why do I like medicine? Since I was a kid, I have always thought of myself as a puzzle solver. I liked the idea. I always thought of myself as a curious person. That was my inner monologue. That was my inner voice. We all have it. We all have some sense of identity. कि मैं कौन हूँ? मुझे क्या अच्छा लगता है? What do I like? What do I not like? I used to think of myself as a curious person. I wanted to know. And when I find a problem, I wanted to figure out how to fix it. Now, because of this inherent nature of mine, I found that biology has a lot of things that I'm curious about. And the problems of biology, if I want to fix, that'll automatically make me a doctor. Right? Now, suppose if you force me to become a physicist, the way I will find motivation is that I will look for curiosity. I'll find what is making me curious in physics. And I'll hook onto that. I'll hold on to that. And I will chase that.
Would you say that the second CTA is creating very strong self narratives and then finding those narratives within the realm of your work?
All the time. Any project, not even all over your work, even in a single project, if you can find something about that project that directly relates to you, you identify with it. This is who I am. Motivation becomes easier. Attention becomes easier.
Got it. Just for the sake of giving an example, you know what you said about you being a puzzle solver? In my head, I've always related with athletes. So I view content creation as a sport and I have to just do my best job as an athlete. That's a strong self-narrative that I've had throughout the course of content creation.
I really love the narrative of athletes, and I'll tell you why. Because I've always thought that sports was a great analogy for life. Because if you condense life, what does it mean? Life is a series of obstacles that you come across that is stopping you from scoring a point or winning a goal or winning the game. And you have to find a way across that obstacle. And if you do, then you win. But that doesn't mean that you stop playing, because now you're on to the next level. And that is what sports is. And you will try, you will fail, you will come back to the drawing board, you'll figure out a new way, and then you'll come back and play again. That's basically evolution in a nutshell. And that's also our life in a nutshell. So over the last 14 billion years, or you could say 4 billion years since Earth was formed, life on Earth has been doing this. Figuring out what protein chain will be more sustainable, which microorganism will live more. And so from that unicellular evolutionary stage all the way to human beings, we have been constantly trying to figure out how to solve this problem. That's basically it. So it's all sports. So if you look at an athlete's brain and you try to learn from what an athlete does or what a sports person does and try to imbibe that, your life would be better. There is no doubt about it. I would say that every student, every child should be trained in some sport. It doesn't really matter which sport, because it's not about the sport. It's about the learnings from the sport, because their brain will get wired to take failure in a certain way, and they will be wired to solve problems in a certain way.
And they'll learn to work with other human beings.
Absolutely. If it's a community sport or if it's a team sport, then yes.
What are other common self-narratives that you think work for people? Again, I'm trying to provide value for the listeners here.
Absolutely.
Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of younger listeners who are just starting out their careers thinking about this one question: hey, what's my own self-narrative? How do I move forward in my career?
So self-narrative is an interesting thing. You cannot create a narrative from scratch, because a narrative has already been made. So anyone who's old enough to listen to this conversation and understand what we are saying already has a narrative. So rather than creating a completely new one, the most important step would be to understand what narrative has already been formed. Because no matter what narrative they create from here on, they are not erasing what has already been formed. So you all, whoever is listening, you all already have some narrative about yourself.
Like everyone is living a movie in their own minds.
Yes.
And a great way to find out your self narrative is often ask yourself about your 3 or 4 favorite movies of all time
Interesting.
and try understanding what the character was doing.
That is one way to do it, for sure, because that is the purpose of art. It plays a role in self-reflection. You can understand yourself because you see yourself reflected in that character, which is also why I feel we like certain songs, because you are feeling an emotion. Not all emotions have words. Not all narratives have words. Not everybody has written their narrative down. It's just a vague feeling of main aisa hi hu. But when you see that reflected in an art form, in a song or in a movie, some character, you might say, Amitabh Bachchan in this character, oh, I relate to this character. That's what you mean. That this character's story arc is how you see yourself. That is valuable. So that is why people should be exposed to art.
Specifically for our times, music and film.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right? These two things. And maybe television shows, like in that same bracket.
Yes. Like, for example, I know that you have related to Cristiano Ronaldo and Virat Kohli a lot. You've talked about this. So something about their life journey relates to you. You see yourself in that. That's your narrative. That's great that you have it. It might not be exactly the same. And that's why you need insight to know कि कहाँ पे similar है और कहाँ पे you are unique. Otherwise, you'll find yourself copying a lot of things they've done and it might not fit with you. But even having some clues कि this is who I relate to or this part of this person I relate to, most people will follow the journey of their parents because they've grown up with that. So a lot of boys would look up to their dads and follow similar styles of thinking, follow similar styles of emotional processing. I've noticed this. I do that. And I realized it in retrospect that, oh yeah, my dad also does this. In this situation, this is how my dad also laughs. Or this in this situation, this is how my dad would handle this conversation. And you're surprised because you didn't copy things knowingly, but you pick things up. So that sort of mirror to your own narrative, it's useful to know because now that I know, I can tweak it. But if you don't even know, then what will you tweak? A great practical way of figuring this out is writing your own story in third person. This has been very interesting. And it's like an experiment. Everyone can just try it out. Think of yourself as a character and write your story. That he went to school and he met these people and this is what he did and this is what he felt and this is why he did it. And as you write, it might take some time. It might take a week, a month to write your life story. But as you write, you will notice things about yourself. And you'll find that some of the things you did don't make sense. Because if you think that you have a narrative and everything that you do is part of that narrative, you are wrong. There are many things that you do that don't fit in with your own narrative, which is why conflict happens, why confusion happens. If it stretches for a long time, it can lead to mental health issues. If you are in conflict with yourself.
Oof. Wow.
So write it down and then spot it कि यार मैं तो कह रहा था कि मैं ऐसा हूँ, but मैंने ऐसा क्यों किया फिर? It doesn't fit. Which means that there is something more in my own narrative that I haven't even thought about. I've not even addressed. I'll give you a personal example. Let's open up. I always thought that I am a very calm person. I was very proud that I never get angry. Even while going through residency, medical residency in KEM Hospital, MD Medicine, one of the toughest residencies, right? Like any top government college, you're very stressed out. You're seeing 100 patients a day. You're running around. You're not getting any sleep. I was very proud that I was managing it without losing my cool, losing my temper. And I brought that same energy to my relationship. Like, I don't get angry. and neither should you. What is this anger? Like, let's process it, let's deal with it. And I also thought that I was an empathetic person. I thought I was kind. I thought that I can understand. If you tell me you're in trouble, I can understand. What I realized is that it's easy to be empathetic if I'm not processing emotion. If I'm angry, but मैं process ही नहीं कर रहा हूँ, I'm not even thinking about my anger, then I don't need to deal with it. So it's easy to be calm, it's easy to be empathetic when I'm not even processing my anger. I realized much later that I am angry. I do get upset, I do get mad, and me not processing it is leading to a problem. So my narrative was wrong. I am not a calm person. I was in denial about certain emotions. Once you realize this, then so much other things make sense. And this is a very purely personal journey, right? This is not for anybody else to learn from. But look at your own life and see if there are contradictions. And once you spot a contradiction, that is where the narrative does not match.
So my question to you is on the word neuroplasticity, because it's the most relevant word for every single listener.
Absolutely. Neuroplasticity has become almost a buzzword for growth, for change. People are putting it out there like this is the key to fixing all of your life's problems. Because whoever you are, you can be anybody. So that's the word neuroplasticity is being thrown around like that. I want to bring it back to core neuroscience. So inside the brain, what does neuroplasticity really mean, right? So there are billions of neurons that connect to each other in the brain. That is how the brain talks. The different parts of the brain talk to each other through synapses. Now, the way that the synapses are connected in your brain would be different from the way they're connected in my brain.
Synapses is like circuits?
So synapse is the connection between one neuron and another neuron. So there can be a synapse between two neurons. There could be trisynaptic connection, so three neurons connecting together. So those synapses are like junctions. So you could think of it as each neuron, if it's like a little town with information, and there are roads connecting each town to another town, then there is a junction at which those two roads meet, and that is the synapse. So at every synapse, there is transfer of information. So one neuron will send an electric signal. That signal will travel down that neuron's, it's called axon, which is the road that leaves the neuron. And that axon will end up at a synapse. Now the next neuron will send its own collecting road. That's called as a dendrite. So the axon and the dendrite will talk to each other, and the axon of the first neuron will give that information. It's like a relay system that here, this is what my neuron had to say. And now the second neuron will take that information and take it forward, right? And that's how all the cells in the, all the neurons in the brain are connected to each other.
And every human being has their own different map inside their brain, right? All of us have billions of neurons.
Yes.
But in all our minds, they're connected very differently to each other. And that's what creates personality.
Yes, correct. Now, there are certain core neurons, there are certain core neural networks that are similar. For example, how we breathe is not unique to you or me, right? Because we are born with that. As soon as a baby is born, the baby knows how to breathe because the baby's brain is already wired to breathe. Or the neurons that keep the heart beating, those are inherently wired. But as the baby grows, and as the baby starts experiencing the world around, those primary neurons that are deep inside the brain, which is in the limbic system, they start getting coded. Even the emotional circuits are not common to everybody. So based on what you as an infant went through and you as a child went through, the way that you process information, the way you process emotions are unique to you. This is why in psychology and psychiatry, so many conversations are happening around childhood. That maybe you are the way you are now because of certain things that you went through as a child. And that is reflected in the way that your neurons are connected.
So all the stories of your life are stored inside your brain as a different set of neural networks.
Yes, a different pattern of neural connections. You could say that. So this is, of course, everything that we say, people have to understand that we are oversimplifying it to a certain level so that we can understand, we can navigate this conversation. But I still feel that this is justified, because if you don't oversimplify it to this level, we cannot then discuss the further complexities.
Gotcha. So let's take the example of two different children, pair of twins, maybe separated at birth. So they're identical twins, they're very similar genetically. They have the same inherent personality and genetics. One twin was brought up in a family that had a dog at home, and that twin grows up loving dogs. And the other twin was maybe bit by a dog when he or she was 2 or 3 years old. Therefore, they grew up with a fear of dogs.
Yes.
So this will manifest as two different neural patterns in both the twins' lives.
Yes. Absolutely. Very well put. Because what is happening is that, suppose at the age of 10, both the twins will come across a dog. Now, both their brains are seeing the image of a dog, but that image is going inside their brains and activating very different circuits. To the twin that grew up with a dog, that image would be activating networks of pleasure, of companionship, of having fun. Whereas to the other twin, that same image of the dog will be triggering emotions and networks of fear, of pain, of running away, of being scared for their life. So the reaction that both the twins have is very different. Since we started the topic on neuroplasticity, basically in one line, what that means is that, suppose if a certain pattern is already set, if the second twin who's scared of the dog, the pattern of image of a dog leading to fear, if that pattern is already set, neuroplasticity is the process of changing that pattern. So if the image of the dog will lead to fear, what are the sets of things that need to happen for that person, for that brain to now stop reacting out of fear and changing that reaction? So at the biological level, what happens is a neuron will sort of disconnect and reconnect with another network. But this is over a million neurons, because it's not just one neuron talking to each other, because there's multiple circuits. So all those circuits need to change for that expression of fear to change into love.
Now let's speak from the perspective of someone in their late 20s. Why is this conversation even important to them? I personally brought up neuroplasticity because I'm 31 now, and I see, at least in my environment, I see two distinct kinds of people in my own friend circle. There's people who have kind of given up on improving in life, and there's people who are hell-bent on improving. I don't know if you feel something similar. Again, this is like, it's not, obviously not as binary as I'm making it out to be. But roughly speaking, I categorize the people around me in these two categories. I think the people listening to this podcast belong to the category of people driven about the process of self-improvement for the sake of their career and relationships, usually, for giving the family more peace and for giving their own self-worth a boost.
Yeah.
Why is neuroplasticity important to a working professional?
Let's put it this way. If you are looking at your brain, and we already spoke about the limbic system, which is the old primitive part of the brain that deals with emotion. So those are the primitive networks of fear. If I'm scared of something, I will have a fight or flight response, or of attraction. If I want something, let me chase it. This is very primitive. This is very deeply rooted in the brain. If we were still at that level, then we would be animals. But we are not, because evolution did not stop there. Evolution took us forward, and we evolved something called as the prefrontal cortex.
This is what separates us from animals.
Pretty much, yes, because it's not that animals don't have a PFC or prefrontal cortex, but it's not as developed as it is in human beings. So what's the difference? Literally, the only difference between us and animals is that we have a more evolved prefrontal cortex. Otherwise, everything else is pretty much the same. The breathing, the heart rate, the emotional centers, all pretty much the same. The prefrontal cortex is capable of one very, very important thing, which is holding information for long enough to learn from it. It's called working memory. Because of this one talent that the PFC has, we are able to make a mistake and understand that, oh, this is what I did, this is the output, let me try to change it. And hold that information for long enough so that a new solution can come out.
So it's the nucleus of your process of self-improvement inside your body.
You can also put it as the CEO of your brain. So I like that analogy a little better, because it's not like the company was not running. It's not like the industry was not running, but it was stagnant. And you need a new CEO to come in to kind of revitalize everything, to have a long-term vision. Where are we going? What are we doing with this? How do we solve these problems? So the prefrontal cortex is like that CEO. And one of the CEO's necessary qualities is that they should be able to learn. And this is where neuroplasticity comes in, because you all have a predetermined bias. If I do this, this will be the outcome. But neuroplasticity is what will tell you that this may not be the case. Let me try out something else. Let me try out another thing. Let me keep experimenting until I hit my desired outcome. That is what the prefrontal cortex is capable of doing.
Okay, so 3 years ago when we were discussing the same topic, we went with a much more basic explanation. I remember us basically concluding by saying that neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to mold itself through the course of life.
Yeah.
So if you keep reading a new book every month, something will keep getting added to your brain. And look at the growth of your brain as the growth of a tree. And every human being, depending on the books they read, the content they consume, the friends they have, the mentors they have, they're going to have a different structure of their brain. And therefore, one 40-year-old is very different from another 40-year-old, because the neuroplasticity that's taken place is very different.
Yeah. Neuroplasticity is a phenomenon that keeps happening.
Okay.
Neurons are constantly breaking and forming new patterns. Whether you like it or not, your brain is neuroplastic. Your brain is learning. So this is an important distinction that I need to make here, that you can't make your brain more neuroplastic. You can only decide what are you learning towards. So the lazy person, their brain has learned that laziness is the best approach for them. That's the conflict. They might say that, oh, I want to achieve a lot of things, but if the outcome is that they're just sitting and not doing anything, for some reason their brain has learned that this is the right approach for my survival.
Great point in this conversation to actually bring up clinical therapy. Okay. I think that every single person listening to this podcast has gone through mental health issues, especially if they're self-improvement oriented. Perhaps the need for self-improvement comes from a place of darkness on some level, according to me. Now, you're a neurologist.
Yeah.
I'd also say that you're a neuroscientist, and your craft deals with the hardware of the brain. Clinical therapists, psychologists deal with the software of the brain. I think this whole realm of clinical therapy, psychotherapy, lots of people discover it in their mid to late 20s because that's when they can begin to afford paying for therapy.
Yeah.
Therapy is expensive. I'm seeing this with a lot of my friends, men, women around me, are getting to know a lot of what they call their shadow sides, basically their own inner darkness. They're realizing a lot about the messed up things that happened in their childhood. They're coming to the forefront at around age 30. And all these guys want to face those realities, accept it, come to a conclusion, and then use it for further growth. Do you want to talk about clinical therapy and its role in human life? Like, where does this whole quote about everyone needs therapy, where does that come from?
You've touched upon 3-4 things, so let me try to organize it. First of all, you mentioned shadow self. So I just want to highlight that there are some terms, there are some concepts which are purely scientific. Like the prefrontal cortex is a part of the brain that has certain functions and you can work with that. There are some concepts which are frameworks. We use those terms to describe something which is subjective. It's not scientific in the sense that you can't prove it. There's no proving a shadow self. But that term is useful because it conveys something. So that difference we have to know. Like for example, vibe. Right? What is vibe? Vibe is not a scientific word. But vibe is not good. If I say it and you understand something, then the purpose of language is solved. Like I said something, you understood something, great. But I can't design a study around vibe because then I have to define what vibe is. And it's a subjective thing. Shadow self is like that. It's something that we can use to explain a subjective phenomenon, but it's not a scientific term. Coming to therapy. Here's my one-line explanation of what therapy is. You are born with all the resources that you need to deal with all of your own emotions. Your brain already has all the necessary tools. Just like your body already has all the necessary tools to find food, digest food, get the energy, your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, they're all working together to keep you alive. You don't need anybody from the outside to give you something. You are born as a fully functional unit. Similarly, in the brain, all the emotions that you have, everything that you go through in life, your prefrontal cortex has the capacity to deal with all of those things. Now, there are two issues here. One, your prefrontal cortex does not mature fully till around 25 years of age. Which means that in the first 25 years, your prefrontal cortex is still maturing. So every year it is a little bit more mature than the previous year. We have a rough cutoff at 18 and we say that beyond 18 you are an adult. That means that hypothetically we are saying beyond 18 you are now capable of taking mature adult decisions. In other words, we are saying that your prefrontal cortex can now be trusted. Which is why we say that now you can drive. Because driving requires a lot of decision making and I can trust you now. Basically, we're saying I trust your pre-FC, nothing else. What happens if you face some problem before your prefrontal cortex is mature enough? What if you go through some emotional turmoil before your PFC is mature enough to handle it? That is where problems can happen. Clear? Now, if there is an issue, say at the age of 12, 13, your brain has that weight now of an unresolved problem. Now, even later on, once your PFC matures, you are still behaving because of those old patterns. But now your prefrontal cortex is mature. Now, theoretically, your PFC can now look back at that old problem, take it, solve it, fix yourself, and move forward. But this takes effort. And very often, we don't really do it. We will just keep moving on, thinking ki, हाँ, ये सब पुरानी बात है, this is all in my past, why keep bringing it up, let me forget it, we suppress it. But those suppressed thoughts still lead to issues. And those issues keep on accumulating, and that is when we have behavioral problems, and depending on how intense it gets. When you go to therapy, you are basically outsourcing your own prefrontal cortex ka job to somebody else.
Wow.
So if I'm sitting here and you are my therapist, I am saying that, listen, for this time, my prefrontal cortex is unable to handle all the things that my limbic system is doing. It is, for whatever reason, it cannot function as it should. Can I give my prefrontal cortex some rest and borrow your prefrontal cortex? And why don't you take all my emotions, process it, and give it to me? Or why don't you guide me, depending on how weak my PFC is? If you think that I just need some support, why don't you guide my PFC to help myself?
And this is the art of clinical psychotherapy.
Correct. in a way, this is also what friends do, but in a much more informal way.
Hey, I need a bouncing board, bro.
Correct. That, listen, आज बहुत बुरा दिन है, क्या करना है बता दे. And you talk to a friend and you calm down after half an hour. We have all noticed it, that when your friend is going through a relationship problem, you are the wisest person. कि क्या इसके साथ क्या कर रहा है भाई, तू सोच नहीं रहा है, don't you realize what is going on? No. When it's happening to you, you are a mess. You will make worse mistakes, because when it's happening to you, your PFC is not working. At that time, your friend will come and advise you. So earlier, this used to be a conflict for me, that how can I be so smart when it comes to other people and stupid when it comes to my own life? Now you realize that this is why when it comes to yourself, your prefrontal cortex does not work in the same way unless you train it. That is where therapy helps, because therapy shows you what does it mean to have a functioning PFC.
Wow.
What does it mean to recognize your emotion? What does it mean to regulate your emotion? Nobody teaches us this. When have we ever been taught that, Ranveer, you will feel anger, this is what anger will do, and this is how you should regulate your anger? Did anyone ever sit you down and explain like this? Emotional regulation is not part of our culture. We don't teach this. How do we do this? अरे छोड़ ना, सबका अपना अपना हो जाएगा. Karma will take care of it. We try to jump ahead and we try to reach acceptance very quickly, because we feel that calmness and acceptance is the ideal way of life. And it is ideal, but you have to reach there organically. You can't just fast forward to acceptance. So if something shitty has happened to you, it's important to go through those emotions and you reach acceptance. That is what the prefrontal cortex's job is.
I think this whole question of going through those emotions is a tricky question to answer, because people are not able to gauge what the appropriate time limit is for going through emotions related to a bad thing happening in your life. For example, a very relatable problem: getting dumped, breaking up.
Yeah.
My question to you is, what should your approach be with respect to time when it comes to processing the negative situations in life?
There is no appropriate time to get over a breakup. It is just like how there's no appropriate time for your skin healing after a wound. It completely depends on the depth of the injury and your own immune system, how healthy the rest of your body is. So for example, I have a small cut on my thigh. Okay. So I fell down. I was playing cricket. I fell down. Some stone cut my skin and there is a wound. Bleeding is happening. But it's not very deep. So I would expect that it should get healed in maybe 2 weeks. But what if I have diabetes? It has nothing to do with the cut, but the rest of my body is not healthy. It would take a month. Worse, it can get complicated. I can get infection on top of it. All those things can happen if the rest of the system is not healthy. So if you have a breakup, but if everything else in your life is going well, you will recover from it much faster. If your body is good, if you are feeling healthy, if your finances are good, if your connection with your family, your friends is good, if you are spiritually in a good place,
If you're sleeping well.
if you're sleeping well, physically you're good, you're eating well, then the recovery from that breakup is going to be different. Versus same breakup, same person, but you're not sleeping well. You hate your job. You are drinking every night. You haven't spoken to your brothers or sisters in 6 months. You don't have any friends. You can feel it, right? That same breakup would affect you very differently. So it's all about the system. You cannot take one single injury and try to look at it in isolation, because your mind or your brain heals overall. So if your system is good, your healing will be better.
Got it. Okay. I think we've entered the realms of mental fitness here. And I personally define mental fitness as the ability to stay ready for the negative phases that life will invariably throw at you.
Yeah.
And as a doctor, what you're saying is that you'll definitely go through some shitty phases in life, but it's very important to focus on the controllables.
Yeah.
And if we have to list out controllables, we're talking about family life, sense of community from family, your physical health, how well you're sleeping, your social circle around you, I'd say the content you consume, and all these other things that we just spoke about. I'm going to just add a bit of a personal anecdote. For me, a very big game changer was when I started to focus on my physical flexibility. I started practicing simple yoga, not elaborate, higher, advanced, just simple stuff to open up my joints, to open up my hips. Every yoga session left me feeling a lot calmer. And you can explain the biology after I'm done explaining what I'm saying. But very often, sometimes, on my worst days, if I was doing a bit of a stretching session myself, alone, in my own isolation, especially when I was stretching my hips, I would end up tearing up a little bit because I would go back to a certain thought and then I felt like something would get triggered. I was releasing some emotion as I was releasing my own hips. And I've asked a lot of yoga coaches about this. They say, yeah, your hips store a lot of emotion, etc., etc. The further I went in this journey of improving my body's flexibility, the more I think that my mind is adaptable when it comes to the waves that life throws at me. This is just my own experience. This was one very big game changer. The second big game changer for me was when I met someone called Dr. Havovi Hyderabadwala. She's a clinical therapist. She's been on the show. She taught me about the concept of something called bad strokes. So she said that every human being has good strokes and bad strokes. And I don't know if I'm doing justice to the explanation, but it's basically about how you respond to a phase of bad mental health. So this is different for every human. A common example of a bad stroke would be turning to alcohol or intoxication, weed, turning to hookups, turning to junk food. Basically, a bad stroke is an activity you take up after a bad phase of mental health that in the long term affects your physical and mental health badly. Another very common bad stroke is listening to a lot of sad music that just enhances your sadness. You can listen to it a little bit, but overdoing it. An example of a good stroke was playing a sport. A good stroke could be taking up stretching. A good stroke could be turning to your friend group without intoxication and just engaging in healthy conversation. Reading the books that push you in the right direction. So she said that you have to be very conscious of your own good strokes and bad strokes. So this is all I have to say. Flexibility and this good strokes versus bad strokes thing.
Let's break it down.
Let's talk about good strokes, bad strokes first.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about it. We'll bring back the concept of framework again.
Sure.
Because I like the framework. Good stroke, bad stroke is a great framework. Not a scientific term, but a good framework to understand the difference between actions or reactions to certain states of mind. Right? You can also call it coping mechanisms. That if something bad happens, how do I cope? And usually all coping mechanisms are acute spikes of dopamine related.
Wow.
Because when you want to cope, you are basically coping because you're feeling sad. Sadness, in a neuroscientific sense, is low motivation. You are feeling low on motivation because your dopamine levels have dropped. So what you want is to acutely or quickly fix that dopamine level. You want to bring your dopamine levels up. What can bring your dopamine levels up? Sugar. So you can binge eat. Alcohol, tobacco, nicotine, hookups, binge watching something can bring it up. Harder drugs, things like cocaine and all of that. It can lead to a spike of dopamine, adrenaline, amphetamine. So you feel that sense of rush. You feel that sense of purpose and excitement, which is purely that action specific. It's not inherent. It's not coming from quote unquote within you. It is from an external source. But for a brief amount of time, it's fine. You feel like you have fixed the problem. But the problem with external sources of neurochemicals is that they run out. And then you are back to that same state. You could even be worse off. Because usually the thing with coping mechanisms is that one coping mechanism will lead to a worse behavior pattern. So if you go out drinking, then your sleep is ruined. And so the next day your dopamine levels are even lower than where you started from. So this is a bad stroke. Whereas all the good stroke examples that you mentioned involves movement largely and community. So it's so interesting because movement is the natural way of increasing dopamine. Same thing, same outcome. But if you start walking fast and you start swinging your arms fast, it is like you're pumping dopamine out or into your brain. So imagine a hand pump and there's water deep underground and you want to bring that water out and you're pumping and after a while water comes out. Movement is basically you pumping dopamine out. If you're feeling low, right, at any point, if you're feeling low, get up and just walk for 5 minutes and keep observing yourself. Think of it as an experiment. You're feeling low, just keep walking. Walk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, keep swinging your arms and notice how that low feeling is going away. And it is going away because dopamine levels are slowly increasing. Even though whatever you were feeling low about is still there. The problem hasn't changed, but the way you look at it changes because the chemicals have changed. It really is that simple. So whenever you're feeling low, don't take any decision until you go for a walk.
Wow.
As a rule of thumb. And then another rule of thumb is, this is not just for you alone. So suppose if you are in a relationship and you and your partner are having a fight, go for a walk. Go for a walk together. Don't talk. Just walk. Go under your building, take 3 rounds. At the end of your 3rd round, notice how the conversation has changed. So you were in your flat, you were fighting, just shut up. Tell her or tell him, let's not do this, let's come down for a walk. Walk 3 times around your building and then start talking. And you will notice that you are calmer, you're more rational, you're more optimistic about the future. You were feeling very low. You were thinking, kuch nahi hoga. I have to break up with this person. After 3 rounds, you might start thinking, okay, let's take a deep breath. Maybe the right outcome is still breaking up with that person, but you will approach that decision in a much more rational way. It won't be an emotional reaction. So I feel that movement is very, very underappreciated when it comes to emotional problems. And that is a great example of a good stroke. So that part I completely agree with. There was something you said before about hips storing a lot of emotion.
I think we're talking about general flexibility.
Yes.
And then this hip storing emotion.
Correct. So I agree with all of it. But the hip storing emotion thing is so interesting because it is true that when you stretch and when you open up your joints, certain things happen to you. Certain things happen to your body. You feel calmer, you feel more relaxed. And in that state of relaxation, you might uncover certain things about yourself. Emotions are stored within the nervous system.
What does that mean?
So emotions, the memory of those emotions, those neural networks like we spoke about, right? Neuroplasticity. So the neural networks that deal with the memory of whatever it is that is making you emotional is stored in your nervous system. It is stored in the hippocampus of your brain and it is stored in the limbic system. But because the action of opening up your hips brought that out, we would say that hips are storing the emotion. So while it might seem ki acha kya farak padta hai, it's almost the same thing, we have to still call it out because ultimately we are chasing truth, or at least we are chasing as close to the truth as possible. It is like saying, I fell in love, but she broke up with me and now I'm heartbroken. Right? But then that's why a lot of love songs wrote about the heart, although everything is coming from the brain. And it's great for poetry, but अगर हम neuroscience की बात कर रहे हैं तो heart और love का connection नहीं है, brain का है. But nobody talks about I love you with all my brain. How are you feeling now? Are you feeling calm, relaxed? Right now your heart rate is probably 60 or 65, something. You're breathing relaxed, aaram se. All your muscles are calm, relaxed. Now suddenly if I take a gun out and I say I'm going to shoot you, a few things will happen. Your body will go from a calm, relaxed state to a fight and flight state. You will go into a state of threat. So this is called as going from parasympathetic to sympathetic, right? When you go into a state of threat, you are basically getting ready to fight. So when you're getting ready to fight, all the muscles in your body will contract. Your body will become rigid, more firm, because you want to fight. You don't know where the punches will come from, so you might have to kick or hit at any moment. Your heart will start beating faster because now all your muscles will need more blood. Your lungs will start breathing faster, right? This combination of things will make you feel like something is happening in the chest because your heart is beating faster, you're breathing faster, your muscles have gotten tight, your chest muscles have gotten tight. So this will lead to you feeling something here. You can start getting neck pain and back pain simply because of anxiety. And that is the sympathetic response that your body goes through whenever you are feeling threatened. Thankfully, this only lasts for a short amount of time, usually, unless you are in a chronic state of threat. So if you are constantly being told that you're under attack, this feeling becomes the norm. So you go into a chronic sympathetic state. And that is what we call as chronic stress, which is the root cause of most psychosocial problems that are happening in the world today.
Like?
So for example, if your muscles are tight, like I said, sympathetic activity, muscles tightening up. Your back muscles will become tight. So there are so many people who will come to my clinic because of neck pain, back pain. There's nothing wrong in their bones, but they are just stressed out. And when I deal with their stress, this disappears because it's a muscle problem. It's a chronic hypersympathetic state problem.
That's how stretching is also linked to this.
Exactly. So when you stretch, you are relaxing the muscles. You're forcing your body to go from sympathetic to parasympathetic because stretching means you're telling your body you don't have to be contracted. You are not going to war. You are safe. Relax. So your body says, okay, let me go back into parasympathetic. And so if you have been in sympathetic for a long time, suddenly going into parasympathetic almost feels like how an army veteran will feel coming home. They've been so on edge for so long that when they suddenly relax, they might cry. They might get a lot of emotions. They might realize that how long have they been fighting, how tired they are.
Let's pause this whole tangent.
Sure.
Just define what sympathetic and parasympathetic are for further understanding.
Absolutely. There is a system in your body called the autonomic nervous system. This is the oldest system in your body. This existed before the brain existed. Okay. So even in organisms that had only nerve nets, there was enough information that some things have to be chased after and some things has to be run away from. So the autonomic nervous system is the oldest system. And the autonomic nervous system has two parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic. These two have to be in balance for your body to be in balance. Every part of your body is under the control of both of these. Your breathing, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Your heart rate, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Your gut, how much you digest the food, sympathetic, parasympathetic. When you pee, sympathetic, parasympathetic. When you poop, the temperature of your skin, how much you sweat, all of this is sympathetic, parasympathetic.
What's the difference?
You are either safe, which is parasympathetic, or you are in danger, which is sympathetic. And today, when we are sitting here, we have prolonged moments of safety. But this is a privilege. Back when we were in the jungle, safety and danger would keep switching, right? You might be sitting, suddenly there's a tiger, you have to fight, and then the tiger is dead, and now you're chilling. You have to keep switching between sympathetic and parasympathetic, which is why these two systems are so closely linked. So as soon as you're in safety, you go into parasympathetic. As soon as you're in threat, you go into sympathetic. That's the basic funda, right? And like I said, if I point a gun at you, you go into sympathetic. All of those changes will happen. Your body cannot go into sympathetic in only one part. It's not like just your heart rate will go up and the rest of the body will be relaxed. You'll go into sympathetic overall. The more I read about the autonomic nervous system, the more I realize that every aspect of our existence is controlled by this balance. Knowing when to fight and knowing when to rest is the core skill that we can learn. The problem is that we are fighting too much and resting too little. Most of us are spending too much time in the sympathetic state, and we are not calming down enough, which is ironic considering how relatively safe we are now. This is probably the safest period of human history. Despite that, your body has been in sympathetic for far too long. Because even the things that we consider as resting, which is scrolling on your phone, is quite sympathetically active. Because you're constantly scrolling through reels and you're getting triggered, you're finding some things, you're angry at some people, you're arguing, all that is happening. And you're considering all this as rest. So you're not in enough parasympathetic. So chronic hypersympathetic activity leads to a lot of imbalances in your body. This is basically the concept of sympathetic and parasympathetic. Does that make sense?
Now let's go to the overarching conversation, which is about stretching one's hips. What is physically inside the hips that makes you release your emotions? Is it some kind of a nerve cluster that is linked to some part of your brain which is linked to your emotions?
Yes, that's pretty much it exactly.
This is biologically proven.
So I'll tell you what. So it's not just the hips. Any joint is held together by muscles, ligaments, capsules, and all of these things are innervated. That is, the nerves are going into all these muscles and joints. Why are your hips not opening up? So very few people can do a complete split, right? Like a 180-degree split. Very few people can do it because kids can do it. When you're born, you take a baby and you put his or her legs like this and they'll go easily. So it's not like your body is not able to. But over a period of time, over several years, because you haven't stretched enough, the muscles and the capsule, the ligaments around your joints become harder and they get firmer. So as you keep stretching, your muscles are relaxing. And like we said, the more the muscles relax, the more the feedback loop sends up signals to push you into parasympathetic. So when you are able to open up your hips to that extent, the flexibility and the muscle relaxations that need to accompany this will set that feedback loop to put you in that state of parasympathetic. And that can lead to emotional reactions. And you spoke about nerve clusters. There is a lumbosacral plexus. So let me talk about plexus for a bit. There are nerves that leave your brain and come down your spinal cord. And then they exit the spinal cord at different parts of your body. So at the lower end of your spinal cord, the nerves that come out will join together as a net, which is called as a plexus. So there's one plexus near your lower abdomen and around the groin area. And there's one plexus around your shoulder, which is called as the brachial plexus. And then there are a couple of plexuses inside the body, near the heart and inside your stomach. So that plexus is what contains all the information that goes to the hip. So yes, those signals go through that plexus and then up to your brain. That part is true.
Wow. Okay. Effectively, each body part of yours is connected to a different part of your brain.
Yes.
Fair to say?
Yes. It's all part of one system.
Like I've been getting into this whole psychosomatic subject.
Yeah. So psycho means psychological means relating to the mind, and somatic or soma means relating to the body. So psychosomatic illness means things that has happened from the brain but manifesting in the body. So I might have pain on my shoulder, but if I scan the shoulder, if I do an MRI of the shoulder, there's nothing wrong. And so if I didn't know about psychosomatic illness, I might say that, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, go home. But that patient would insist that, no, doctor, I am having pain. What do I do? But I can't understand where the pain is coming from. I would say you are faking it or you are mistaken. This is the problem of psychosomatic, that we are still understanding how the brain and the body are connected like this. So chronic pain can happen. It can be in the shoulders, it can be in the neck, it can be in the lower back. It happens a lot. It can even be not pain. It could be other things like burning. I've had patients who've come with severe burning on one hand that go up to the middle of the body and in the leg. But everything else is normal. And it turns out that what they were having is severe anxiety, and you treat the anxiety and this gets better. So these sort of psychosomatic problems can happen, do happen. I see a lot of patients with this, but it's important to understand where it comes from.
All in all, when it comes to the psychosomatic subject, there's conjecture, but we don't have scientific proof yet.
Perfect, yes.
In order to conclude, neuroplasticity is all about the moldability of your brain and your nervous system as your life progresses.
Yeah.
The best thing that you can do for yourself is choose a career that you enjoy.
Yes.
If you are forced to be in a career that you don't enjoy, try creating a self-narrative based on the stories you've told yourself and your interests from your childhood.
Yes.
And hey, I'm just an athlete at work. Hey, I'm a good professional. I need to provide for my family. I'm doing this for my family, etc.
Yes.
Next.
The way to find your own narrative is to write about it in third person. That's just a neat trick that people should use.
Very important to be reflective over the course of your 20s.
Yeah.
Because it's setting you up for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I think we live in a society that is almost designed in a way that you're almost always guaranteed some kind of mental health issues because your sympathetic nervous system is too switched on.
Yeah, we are constantly on the stressed out side of things, and chronic stress leads to a lot of problems, not just mental health. It can lead to a lot of physical issues as well. So even your risk of heart disease, your risk of kidney disease, brain disease, all of these things increase because of chronic stress. So chronic stress is now one of the risk factors for almost everything that can go wrong with you.
Okay. Then the basics, focus on your lifestyle, focus on family life, your exercise, sleep, all that. Like the basics that people already know.
Yeah.
Then we spoke about flexibility.
Yes. And we spoke about therapy also. And you can combine these two, because when we're talking of flexibility of body, flexibility of mind is also important. And that's what therapy does.
Do you think, not always of course, but usually, at least I've noticed this with a lot of people who practice yoga around me, a flexible body usually indicates a flexible mind.
I would say that a flexible body makes it easier for your mind also to be flexible. Because once your body is healthy and flexible, we're going to use flexibility as a marker for health. That means that that's one less thing to worry about. And that's one less thing that you're stressed out about. And in general, a flexible body would mean you are more in parasympathetic, which means you're stretching regularly, you're taking care of yourself, you're deep breathing, all of that. And the more in parasympathetic you are, the more capable you are of dealing with problems. So what does a flexible mind mean? If something unexpected happens, I can deal with it calmly. Like I can adapt, I can change. Whereas if I'm in full war mode, if I'm in sympathetic mode, and I'm all about, no, I have to do this. Something suddenly comes up, I will lose my mind. So the more calmer you are, the more flexible you are. So that is the connection.
Gotcha. I think we painted a really dark gray sky during the course of this podcast. And I do think that, it's a slightly philosophical thing to say, but the Buddha said that suffering is the nature of human life. So this whole episode was actually about suffering.
In a way, yes.
Because you're sent here to evolve through your suffering.
Yeah.
And that's what the sequel to this episode will be about.
When you say that there is suffering is inevitable, what you're saying is growth is inevitable. Because every time something new happens to you and you are not capable of dealing with it and you fail, that is when you suffer. You suffer when you are not able to come to terms with the fact that you couldn't do something or you didn't achieve something. That is the necessary step before you actually do figure out what to do. And that is what growth is. So suffering and growth for me kind of go hand in hand. So it's not all gray. I think there is still a rainbow there.
Gotcha. These are the kind of things they need to teach us in college.
Emotional regulation more than anything. If I had the power, I would make sure that every school student would be taught basics of neuroscience and emotional regulation right from class 5th or 6th.
Yeah. In Interstellar, what's that actor's name? Michael Caine?
Yeah.
He's the actor. So Michael Caine has this poem that he says in Interstellar. That do not go
gently into the good night.
Do not go gently into the good night.
Yeah.
It's so true for life. Like graduating from college is a good feeling. No one tells you about how intense adult life can get.
Yeah.
But it's important to have that perspective.
Absolutely.
Let's end this episode. That was the episode for today. Ladies and gentlemen, please watch out for the sequel episode. It's a deep dive into the process of the evolution of the human species. This episode was extremely enlightening, but it builds up into the next one. So watch out for the release of that one. Send in your inputs for this episode as well. Neuroscience is one of those topics that we're going to constantly dive into over the next few years. So send in guest recommendations as well. But until next time, guys, from Ranveer and the team and Dr. Sid Warrier, we'll be back with some more science.